Welcome to Postscript number 1 in our series, Rereading Revelation. Our series proper, the text exposition in our series is really over. It's finished in presentation number 27, Rereading Revelation, text-based. But there are some perspectives I'd like to explore. And we will do 3 postscripts. This is number 1. And the first question is, which Old Testament voice carries the greatest weight in Revelation? This is not a trivial pursuit question. This is not Jeopardy, where you just score a point. Oh, I got the answer correct. The answer to this question is consequential for how we read Revelation. And I hope that we can show why. So, in earlier times, and the various schools of interpretation on Revelation really didn't pay that much attention to the Old Testament. Looked at history of the Roman Empire, history of the world, our time, futurism, what is happening in our time. But lately we have become much more attuned to the need to pay attention to the Old Testament, and one of the people who have been a pioneer in that shift is John Pauline, who is a friend and mentor and former dean of mine at Loma Linda University. So there is now broad consensus that one cannot read Revelation intelligently without paying attention to the Old Testament. But then the question, which Old Testament voice is the weightiest? And I think there is a reason to ask that question, and I should do this and keep it suspenseful and list the options before giving a conclusion. But I don't think I can do it that way. That would seem a little contrived. So I'm going to say it right away and give you the conclusion at the beginning. I will say the answer is the book of Job. That's the answer. And I'd like to explain why. Because that is not the answer you might expect. You might actually think that, there are many other Old Testament books that are featured in much more broadly in Revelation than Job. But that is not as true as you might think. Here is a point to consider. Just as Job is the most expansive theodicy in the Old Testament, Revelation is the most complete theodicy in the New Testament. Theodicy, studying the ways of God, studying whether God's actions seem defensible, comprehensible, fair, just, such questions. So that is the question in the book of Job. That is the question also in the book of Revelation. Job depicts a crisis of trust in the human realm. Revelation depicts a crisis of trust in the heavenly council. And actually, Job and Revelation have in common that they play out in the heavenly council. There is a heavenly council in both. So, while other voices in the Old Testament do make significant contributions to the book of Revelation, they do not quite reach the level of significance that we have in the book of Job. Daniel is a candidate. Here is Daniel as Michelangelo depicts him in the Sistine Chapel. And Daniel is a major contributor to Revelation. Here are concepts in Revelation that echo Daniel. And the list is long. The items are significant. We're not going to do it in detail. I just want to show you that these are important texts to Revelation. Even more important, probably, is Isaiah. Here again, as Michelangelo depicts him, and the long list of very significant items in Revelation that draw on Isaiah, such as the root of David, the revealer who is able to break the seals of the scroll, such as the war in heaven. Those themes are drawn from Isaiah. And not to leave out, here is the in the fifth trumpet, you have a star that fell from heaven, and it recapitulates the story of the great star in Isaiah 14. What about Ezekiel? Ezekiel is another voice here, as Michelangelo depicts Ezekiel. And you can see a long list of important concepts in Revelation that are indebted to the prophet Ezekiel. And now, maybe slightly less, but let's not leave him out. Jeremiah, he looks sad. He's a grieving prophet. He has lots of tears. And he contributes to Revelation. The concept of Babylon and the story of Babylon in Revelation draws heavily on Jeremiah. So here we have, in terms of specific texts, more material filtering into or sort of passed on to Revelation than just the textual similarities between Revelation and Job. But that is not the only thing that counts. Well, let's do Genesis too. Genesis is also an important book here, especially the story of the temptation with the serpent. And here we have concepts in Revelation that are clearly calling to mind texts in Genesis. So it would be meaningful to look at all those texts in detail, but we do not have time for that. We need to go to the book of Job as quickly as we can. We're just going to make a brief stop, one last one here, Zechariah. A short book in the Old Testament, but a major contributor to Revelation on big items and theologically very interesting items, such as the two witnesses and things in Revelation 11, for instance. So let's look at Job, what Job has to offer, and why the case for Job is the strongest case. First, we read about Job the man. There was once a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. That man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. And I will be using illustrations from William Blake, who has generously and repeatedly painted, drawn the book of the book of Job pictures, and they help the imagination a great deal. Here is the pious man. He has a happy family, 3 daughters, 7 sons. He's very well-to-do. There are musical instruments in the trees. It's a pastoral, happy, good life here for Job. He is a pious man, and he is a prosperous man. And that leads to the question, is he prosperous because he is pious? Is there a link between piety and prosperity? Is there even a theology that says that piety is a way to prosperity? That is the question. And then Satan enters. We haven't read many lines in the book of Job before Satan enters. The character of Satan is not as easy a thing to take control of in the book of Job, because many scholars think that the Satan of the book of Job is not such a bad person. He's actually a nice guy. He is a little bit of a nuisance because he asks difficult questions, but basically Satan and God get along very well. That's what many scholars think. I don't think so. And I think the texture of this relationship is already fractured as we see it in the book of Job, and as we shall see in some of the details that come out. But we cannot engage in that scholarly discussion completely. I will say one or two more things about it, but let's read what happens here in the book of Job. One day the heavenly beings came to present themselves before the Lord. It's the heavenly council. And Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From going to and fro the earth, and from walking up and down on it." I could almost infer here that God saying to Satan, "Where have you been? Haven't seen you for a long time," as though there is already distance between God and Satan, as though it is an adversarial relationship. And that's the view I will defend, and will then have one text here to bolster that point. Here in Ezekiel, there is an action and a location that is such a contrast to this. God asking Satan here where you have been, and Satan answers that he has been going to and fro on the earth. Here the covering cherub, that is Ezekiel's term for the figure that becomes Satan in the New Testament. It says about him, "You were the anointed cherub who covers. You were on the holy mountain of God." Not on the earth. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked to and fro in the midst of the stones of fire. And then this figure is expelled, or he loses his place there. And Job sees him here walking back and forth, maybe maliciously, maybe aimlessly, maybe a lost soul walking back and forth on earth, who once walked back and forth in the heavenly realm, as it were. That's the sort of adversarial setup that I think one should imagine here. And then God speaks. The Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil." Why is God saying that? Why is he bringing Job to Satan's attention? Why is he doing that unless there was some problem, some reason for doing that, for putting Job out there? Some things that Satan has been saying and looking for, that is to his advantage, and then God bringing to his attention something that Satan would rather not know about. Then Satan answered the Lord, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a fence around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand now and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face." So this relationship that you are so proud of, God, isn't such a good relationship. Just put it to the test and it will fall apart, is what Satan here says to God when he appears here in William Blake's depiction. So, point to consider. There is already then a conflict playing out in the heavenly council. There is already a relationship that is adversarial and hostile. I'm saying that's the relationship between God and Satan. Again, some scholars say that isn't so. They say Satan is just a court clerk, someone who opens the mail for God, and once in a while he makes some careless comments about things. And if that is the character of Satan, then the book of Job is a very frivolous book. Then it isn't a really serious book. Then what happens to Job later on will be God and Satan playing games with Job. And my friend, one of the greatest scholars on Job in our time, I will call him a friend. We are not close friends, but he has published one of my books, David Klein's, who has written a 3-volume book on commentary on Job, and is a scholar in Sheffield in the UK. He has written an article called Job's Fifth Friend. Notice later in the book, Job will have 4 friends. 3 good friends, and then Elihu, 4 friends. But David Klein says Job needs a 5th friend. Job's 5th friend is David Klein's, who lives in our time, and who wishes to defend Job against the frivolity of the book of Job, for taking such liberties with this man that is so unfair, and God and Satan together just playing games with Job. Well, that is a view that is understandable if you think, or if you don't see Satan as a diehard adversary of God. If he's an adversary, then things are really serious. Satan says to God that Job's piety is bought, and it's a matter of self-interest. Job is in it for the money. And you, God, you have invested in Job because it makes you look good. You're in it for the money too. You're two of a kind. Self-interest operates on both sides, Job's and God's. You're sort of just in a transactional relationship where you both have benefits and vested interests. And the question that follows here is, does unselfishness exist? Is it true what Satan says, that there is actually no unselfishness, that God is not a selfless God, an unselfish God, a giving God? That's what is implied here. And I will ask you, would you like to know the answer to that question? You think it is important to know whether unselfishness exists, or whether all conduct is self-interested conduct? Would you like to know? Well, the book of Job will let us know. So, God says to Satan, very well, all that he has is in your power. Only do not stretch out your hand against him. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. And it isn't a good thing, because you can see his design already here on bringing harm to Job's family here, as you can see. And then I will just do this, the next couple of scenes in pictures. Blake, first Satan hits Job's property and makes him a poor man. And then he hits his family and kills all his children, the 7 sons and the 3 daughters. And then a messenger comes with the news. It's bad news. And one other messenger comes, because this happens in waves, wave upon wave, and the messenger comes and tells him what has happened, and it's terrible. And Job says that the Lord gave and the Lord took. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He is still not shaken in his confidence in God. And then there is a second round. Satan again appears in the heavenly council. Again he brings the same charges. Again he says to God, well, you are protecting him. Take away his health. Take away his health, and you will see that he will curse you to your face. And God gives him permission, and Satan goes forth, and he takes away Job's health. That's where we are at the end of chapter 2. And that's the end of the frame story in Job. The first 2 chapters are in prose, and they are called the frame story. We transition in this book into a poetic section. And in the poetic section, Job's friends arrive. And we read, now when Job's 3 friends heard all of these troubles that had come upon him, each of them set out from his home, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. They met together to go and console and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him, and they raised their voices and wept aloud. They tore their robes and threw dust in the air upon their heads. Here, And they sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great. The reaction is a reaction of genuine empathy, isn't it? And the body language of these friends as they approach the sufferer here in Blake's illustration is really quite adequate. It's quite striking. And they sit there for 7 days saying nothing. And I tell medical students, through the years I have told them, I use this story to say that sometimes we are at our best when we say nothing. We just listen. We just stay there and participate. It is when we start talking that the trouble starts. And here, Job will be the one who starts talking. So Job speaks. And Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. Job said, "Let the day perish in which I was born, and the night that said a man-child is conceived. Why did I not die at birth, come forth from the womb and expire? Or why was I not buried like a stillborn child, like an infant that never sees the light?" Life is not worth living. This is not a good life, and I would rather not exist. That's what Job is saying. And then he says, why is light given to one who cannot see the way, whom God has fenced in? Well, that's what he says. When the friends hear that, they start speaking. So here I have a bit of a garbled text, but overlook that. I'm not exactly sure what has happened here on my screen, but Eliphaz, the oldest and on the leading voice, he will be speaking first, and he will say who can keep from speaking. And you can see the body language in Blake's illustration, that they all now assume a posture of accusation. And Eliphaz will say to Job, "Think now, who that was innocent ever perished? Did anyone who is innocent ever suffer? If you are truly pious, you are prosperous. If you're truly pious, you're healthy. And you are not healthy anymore. And you have lost your property. You are not prosperous anymore. There must be something wrong. Or were there upright, or where were the upright cut off, as I have seen? Those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same." So they have an explanation for Job's suffering. He is suffering because he has sinned. That is the theological proposition number one that is coming now to the fore in this story. Suffering is the consequence of sin. Theological thesis number one in the theology of Job's friends. And then Satan and Job's friends have the same theology, because Satan has said that piety leads to, or he has attacked that proposition, that he has said that Job is prosperous because of piety. So that means if you're pious, you have the reward of prosperity. If you do not have prosperity, you have the punishment, or you have sin. So sin leads to punishment. Suffering is a consequence of sin, and prosperity is a consequence of piety. So those are the two things, and I'm saying that Satan has that paradigm, or he is attacking that. He is trying to show that it is so. And Job's friends have that view, and maybe Job thought so too. At some point in the past, he also thought that there is a connection between piety and prosperity. That's possible. So we go on in the story, and here Eliphaz is talking on. This is Eliphaz's first speech, first answer to Job in the poetic section. And listen to what he says. He says, now a word came stealing to me. Here is Blake's picture of someone appearing to Eliphaz in the middle of the night. A word came stealing to me. My ear received a whisper of it. Amid thoughts from visions of the night, when deep sleep falls on mortals, dread came upon me, and trembling, which made all my bones shake. A spirit glided past my face. The hair on my flesh bristled. It stood still, but I could not discern its appearance, this figure that appears to him. A form was before my eyes. There was silence. Then I heard a voice. Can mortals be righteous before God? Even human beings. Or can human beings be pure before their Maker? Even in his servants he puts no trust, and his angels he charges with error. How much more those who live in houses of clay, whose foundation is in the dust, who are crushed like a moth. So here, Eliphaz has had a vision. He's had a revelation. Someone came to him and spoke to him, corroborating the view he has expressed to Job. Suffering is proof of sin. Sin has the consequence of suffering. God punishes the sinner. And actually, it's more severe. In the vision, he adds severity to it. So let's ask some questions. Did Eliphaz have a vision? Let's say that he did, that he actually did. He thinks the vision was from God. Was it from God? Is this good theology? He claims to have had a revelation, and his view is that is similar to what he has said earlier to Job. Eliphaz's vision is theological thesis number 1 on steroids. Piety leads to prosperity. Sin leads to punishment. But no piety is good enough. Nothing is good enough. So here you have an extreme view of human finitude and divine transcendence. Human beings are very, very low. God is very, very high. Huge distance. And finitude is itself tainted with sin. But if you follow through this line of reasoning, at issue now is not only Job's claim to piety. The target is God. Nothing is good enough for God. That's where we are when Eliphaz has spoken and has told us of his vision. Just to go back a hair here. So this is what the being that appears to Eliphaz says it in the night. Even in his servants he put no trust, and his angels he charges with error. His angels he charges with error as though he charges them unfairly. It is almost as though we can hear the voice of the voice of Satan in this dream, feeding this into Eliphaz's theology. Okay. So we move on through here the book, and I wish we could do it in more detail. All the friends will speak, or Job will speak, then a friend speaks, Job speaks, another friend speaks, and these go through 3 or 4 cycles of poetry. But there is a kind of monotony to it. It's like there is a kind of formula to the theology of Job's friends. They all have the same view. They all have the same body language, stance, and theology. Look at this, Eliphaz. Think now, who was innocent ever perished? If you were really innocent, you wouldn't be in such a bad shape. Bildad, surely the light of the wicked is put out, and the flame of their fire does not shine. Zophar, do you not know this from old? ever since mortals were placed on earth, that the exulting of the wicked is short and the joy of the godless is but for a moment. That if you're bad, you won't last very long. If you're good, everything will be fine. That's what they all say. And they all imply that Job, well, you weren't such a good man after all. Now you and I, because of the frame story, we have to smile a little here at their certitude and the monotony, because in the frame story, God certifies Job as a pious man. He's an upright man. And he even uses him to say that he can show him forth to Satan. But the paradigm is sin leads to suffering. Suffering is proof of sin. That is the paradigm. And then you have a consensus. When you look at their sources, Eliphaz claims revelation. He had visions of the night. Bildad claims tradition. He asks bygone generations. And Zophar consults reason or philosophy, my inner sense. So all of those come to the same conclusions. Job doesn't stand a chance. He is sort of boxed in. This is it. That's how it is. And then the monotony and the certitude, yes, that's there. And then they really go for the jugular. They go for broke. Eliphaz, there is no end to your iniquities. He starts out quite, Job, I hope you don't get offended. I hope you will not, be, you'll take it as a good gesture from me. But now the gloves are off. This is serious. There is no end to your iniquities. For you have exacted pledges from your family for no reason, and stripped the naked of their clothing. You have given no water to the weary to drink, and you have withheld bread from the hungry. That's what he's saying. It isn't true. It isn't true. It is patently false. It is fake reasons in order to salvage a flawed doctrine. The teaching is flawed, and you have to make up stuff to make it survive. Zophar, these are friends, and know then that God exacts from you less than your guilt deserves. You're getting off easy. And Eliphaz here later, he says, can a mortal be of use to God? Can even the wisest be of service to him? Is it any pleasure to the Almighty that you are righteous, or is it gain to him if you make your ways blameless? God couldn't care less if you're wicked or if you're not wicked. That's what he is saying. But this is a desperate attempt to silence Job, because all along they have argued the opposite, that you are actually suffering because of your sin and God is punishing you, and suddenly they say it doesn't matter. So it's not a coherent teaching. So Job, he defends himself. Here, if you see it closer, you can see the boils in his skin and how terribly he suffers. He says to his friends, as for you, you whitewash with lies. All of you are worthless physicians. You're doing theological malpractice. It's really terrible what you're doing. You are making up stuff. They actually, in another sentence, he says, you are defending God with lies. You're lying, so to defend God, that's not a good thing to do. And then he tells them, have you not asked those who travel the roads? And do you not accept their testimony, that the wicked are spared in the day of calamity and are rescued in the day of wrath? So who prospers in this world? Not the pious person. The wicked people prosper. And Job fights back. And Job counters their arguments. And there is a sort of dynamism to Job's thought. There is an evolution in the dialogue. But that is not true for the friends. They are sort of sclerotic, staying in the same place, defending the same formulaic dogma. And then it ends here in chapter 32. These 3 men ceased to answer Job because he was righteous in his own eyes. Job actually wins the discussion. He actually wins the discussion. He argues on the side of truth. He is bloodied, but he is unbowed by their attacks on him and their attacks on his integrity. And then Job is kind of introspecting a little more. He starts out carefully thinking, I really wish I could talk to God. I really wish I could get an audience with God and maybe hear what is going on here, because it isn't right that I should suffer this way, and it isn't what they are saying about me isn't right. And he thinks now more in relation to God. Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come even to his dwelling. I would lay my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would learn what he would answer me and understand what he would say to me. Would he contend with me in court in the greatness of his power? No, but he would give heed to me. There is an upright person, an upright person could reason with him, and I should be acquitted forever by my judge. I have a friend. God is my friend. I could just talk to him. It would be fine. And then later on, oh, that I had one to hear me. Here is my signature. Let the Almighty answer me. Oh, that I had the indictment written by my adversary, as though God is the adversary. Surely I would carry it on my shoulder. I would bind it on me like a crown. I would give him an account of all my steps. Like a prince I would approach him. So Job's confidence is gaining that it would be to his advantage to have an audience with God. Well, what do the friends think about that? After the 3 friends have sort of folded, a younger guy comes on the scene. His name is Elihu, and he is like the other friends, only more rude. He is as rude as a young know-it-all only can be. That's how rude he is. And it isn't so interesting to listen to him. His poetry is also more primitive than the others. But theological thesis number 1 is still there. Suffering is proof of sin, although Job has seriously weakened it. Theological thesis number 2, nothing is good enough for God. That is still there. Job has seriously weakened that too, to some extent. And then there is theological thesis number 3. God does not owe anyone an explanation. The yearning for an explanation is itself sinful. And then God speaks. And you wonder, is this a victory for Job? Because the friend said that God will not answer you. Or is it a victory for the friends? Because God may say things to Job that seem like he is also rebuking Job. In fact, some interpreters think that Job is now the recipient of cosmic bullying, that God is bringing God's weight to bear on poor Job. Well, I think that is a serious misreading, but let's see. There is a reason, there is a kind of first impression here that might make you think so. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you shall declare me to me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. It is as though God uses sarcasm, and he puts Job down in a way. And it might seem that the friends could say, wow, give it to him. We couldn't persuade him, but you will surely do it, God. Well, don't draw that conclusion just yet. In the first speech, God's first speech, he tells Job about the wonders of nature, all the strange things in the world. that we surely do not know. There are some things we don't know. And maybe Job has in some ways exceeded his own sort of understanding of what he knows. And then in God's second speech, what does he do? Here I need to explain how I think this should be read. Satan is in the frame story. He's a major figure in the frame story. Many people read the book of Job as though Satan is only in the frame story, chapters 1 and 2, and then he is gone. Here is what I think, and I have some other few scholars who think the same way, that Satan re-enters the story in the poetic section, but now he is the figure of Leviathan in God's speech to Job. What does God say about Leviathan? He talks about Leviathan. Can you draw out Leviathan with a fishhook or press down its tongue with a cord? This is not God describing some animal. He is describing a supernatural figure, using a poetic idiom to describe him. That's what he's doing. Will Leviathan, will it make many supplications to you? Will it speak soft words to you? Will it make a covenant with you to be taken as your servant forever? Any hope of capturing it will be disappointed. Were not even the gods overwhelmed at the sight of it? No one is so fierce as to dare to stir it up. Who can stand before it? Who can confront it and be safe? Under the whole heaven? Who? So here is a power that is too big for humans, and humans cannot stand up to it, but it has a role to play, and only God then can deal with it. Listen to this description of Leviathan's mouth. And we have studied the book of Revelation, and we have seen words coming out of the mouth of the dragon, and the beast, and the false prophet, and other things in the book of Revelation. From its mouth go flaming torches, sparks of fire leap out. Out of his nostrils comes smoke, as from a boiling pot and burning rushes. Its breath kindles coals, and a flame comes out of its mouth. All this destruction. Its heart is as hard as stone, as hard as the lower millstone. When it raises itself up, the gods are afraid. At the crashing, they are beside themselves. On earth it has no equal, a creature without fear. It surveys everything that is lofty. It is king over all that are proud. We need to cut this short. Here, in God's speech about Leviathan, Job gets an answer. In my view, Job gets to know. In God's speech to Job, what we know from the frame story. Because many readers of this book think that we get to know something that Job never gets to know. But it seems here that he does get to know here in the frame story. So let's look now and compute it and get back to some things in relation to the book of Revelation. So, number one, the idea that suffering is proof of sin is wrong. It's not true. That's false, and Job rebuts it. The idea that finitude is sinful in itself is also wrong, and it is wrong mostly for what it says about God, that God regards finitude is not good enough. It's sinful in itself. So, while Job's friends have attacked Job, they have attacked God even more, and so has Satan in the frame story. The idea that humans should not expect an answer, or that God does not answer, is also wrong. God speaks. Job gets to know what we know. Satan in the frame story is Leviathan in the poetic exchanges. All makes sense if we put these things together. The idea that God rebukes Job is correct, but only to a point. Let's look some more. after the Lord had spoken these words to Job and seemingly rebuked Job, the Lord said to Eliphaz the Temanite, "My wrath is kindled against you and against your two friends." What about Elihu? He's all left out. "My wrath is kindled against you and against your two friends, for you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has." So something Job did was right after all, and and Job is vindicated, and then God says that they can make amends, bring an offering, and Job will offer it up, and my servant Job shall pray for you, for I will accept his prayer, not to deal with you according to your folly, for you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. So here Job is clearly the one who comes out of this looking the best. And now let's look at the book of Revelation, and we will conclude. The textual echoes in Revelation from the book of Job are scant. There's not much textual echo. But the theme is exactly the same. The theme, the story, is the same in Revelation and in Job, even though these textual features are so scant. In Job, the setting is the heavenly council. So it is in Revelation. In Job, the scope is cosmic, as it is in Revelation. God, angels, Satan, and a big issue, a problem. The problem in Job is accusations against God. Yes, accusations against Job too, but mostly accusations against God. And so it is in Revelation. Slander against God, misrepresenting God. And here in Job, God is misrepresented by Satan, and he is misrepresented by those people who claim to defend God, the people who have theological expertise. They actually say bad things about God. And in the Revelation, that is also a problem. So here we have an adversary, and here we have the adversary too in Revelation. We have an accusation that unselfishness doesn't exist. We have that one in Revelation too, in the way the serpent misrepresents God as the ancient serpent. We have an answer to Job in the form of revelation. We have an answer in Revelation, and it is a revelation. And we have a specific answer, God's answer to Job and Job's witness to God. Those are the answers here. And here we have the Lamb as the true witness about God, and we have the witness of the believer who are like Job in Revelation. And we have a crisis resolution here. God is seen to be right. And we have a resolution here. God is seen to be right. There are strong parallels between those texts, and I will now have some conclusions. Just as Job is the most expansive theodicy in the Old Testament, Revelation is the most complete theodicy in the New. I said that at the beginning, I'm saying it again here. Job depicts a crisis of trust in the human realm, Revelation a crisis of trust in the heavenly council. Job, the book of Job, shatters the link between sin and retribution. Does the book of Revelation reinstate it? Because many people read the book of Revelation, the New Testament theodicy that is equivalent to the book of Job in the Old Testament, as though Revelation reinstates divine retribution as the main thing. In the seals, the trumpets, and the bowls, God is hitting hard back. Just a question. Theological orthodoxy in Job depicts his suffering as just. Interpretative orthodoxy of Revelation makes retribution a necessity. These are big issues. This is not trivial pursuits. These are serious questions. Job's friends echo the satanic slander their theology is like the theology of Satan in the frame story. In Revelation, the slander is promoted by satanic surrogates posing as witnesses to Jesus. So there is in both of these books you have witnesses claiming to represent God that actually misrepresent God. See that? God's speech from the whirlwind highlights Leviathan, that is Satan, and Revelation exposes Satan. It's similar. The outlook and slander of the antagonist has a foothold among believers. That's certainly true in the book of Job, and it is also the contested territory in the book of Revelation. This is my last slide. Job's witness to God, speaking of God, what is right, is similar to the witness of the first angel in Revelation. Speaking of God, what is right. Speaking well of God. These books have big things in common, and Job is the Old Testament voice, most important in the book of Revelation.